Hello everyone and welcome to today's GESS Talks webinar. We're excited to have you join us as we explore the future of education, evolving pedagogy and skills for tomorrow's workforce. In this session, our panel will discuss how pedagogy is evolving to create more dynamic learning environments and preparing students with the essential skills required for tomorrow's workforce. Before we dive in, just a quick note to say on the side of your screen, you should find a control panel with a Q&A tab. So feel free to submit your questions throughout the session, as we'd love to hear from you, and we'll address as many questions as possible during the discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our chair and moderator, Tracy Moxley, Executive Director of Schools at New Century, who brings extensive expertise in educational leadership. So over to you, Tracy.
Hi everyone, welcome to this inspiring and hopefully insightful conversation around the future of education. One of my most favourite topics because it brings in so much. We are delving into questions around pedagogy, around skills, roles and role reversal, curriculum and well-being. And with me are three amazing panelists, Priya Mitchell, CEO and Safeguarding. Priya has led this area with over 30 years of experience in consulting and advising. Welcome, Priya. Lovely to meet you today. Tracy Jones, CEO, Chrysalis Mindset, also known as the language alchemist. We'll be asking you, Tracy, and who's coached more than 300 head teachers and 4,000 or more educators. A lifetime's work already. And Michael Bradbury, Director of Education for the Centre of Entertainment Arts, specialising in game design, video games in education, and who introduced esports into the UAE curriculum. Welcome, Michael, as well. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
So I want to sort of kick off with what we mean when we talk about the future of education and what the key features of that is. And I'm kind of going to ask everyone to input. What are those future-focused practices? And we hear a lot about reimagining education. And we really recently talked about COVID, and we talked about the paradigm shift in education, how we were forced to change the way that we worked. And then suddenly we snapped back. So what is future? What is the future of education when we talk about it? What do we mean by it? Michael, can I come to you first on that one?
Yeah, thank you. The future of education. I mean, it's such a ambiguous topic, isn't it? So it's such a
It's everything, right?
It's everything. I'm so glad you came to me first. But it's the future of education is just improving what we currently do, in my opinion, like using marginal gains and small iterations to improve on what we currently have. It's not the concept of when people think the future of education, it's we have to be dramatically different to what we do now. We need to have this future focus, everything's going to be completely different. And it isn't that. It's just the addition of new technologies to enhance the learning, to help the instructors, to make the job, which is an incredibly difficult job at the best of the time, easier, better, and making sure that all the stakeholders involved in it get better outcomes.
I love the fact you say it's just the introduction of technology, because that's kind of quite a big item in terms of introduction of emerging technologies as well as the technology we already know. I don't know if they've emerged or not yet. I assume they have. We've got AR, we've got virtual, we've got immersive technologies, and so that's for many people it's quite a big move. I mean, if we imagine, I go back to sort of Michael Fullan. He was writing in 2011 about technology and pedagogy and change knowledge, and we're kind of still here talking about it because I'm not sure we've really cracked it yet. We haven't cracked that conundrum. Priya, what do you think? What's your vision? What do we mean when we're talking about the future of education and pedagogy?
So for me, I come at it from the well-being safeguarding point of view. And one of the things that we've noticed, like you were saying, talking about COVID and all the data that's coming out is about how the mental health of our children is deteriorating. Anxiety levels are through the roof, depression is through the roof. Anyone who's read The Anxious Generation will not be surprised. So I sit here thinking about what Michael's saying about technology, and also thinking about the research that's come out about how technology is having a detrimental effect on mental health. So for me, it's finding that way forward. I know lots of schools in the UAE have already started implementing like the mobile phone ban during the school day. So one of the things that I think we need to look at as people working in education is how are we skilling up our young people around their mental health? How are we skilling up our educators around recognising mental health needs of our students, and how are we skilling up the parents to support their children as well? Because the services are out there, but they're a finite amount of services. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I was saying earlier that it's quite disappointing that when we saw, when COVID hit and mental health and being online really went to the forefront in our educational institutions. It was something that we really knew we needed to deal with because everyone was online. And we also had, our students who have special ed, or the students of determination, the higher order students, the high achieving students. And we started working online with those students in smaller groups, dealing with how that would work online. And then suddenly it feels like we've lost it again as we bounce back. So just before I go to Tracy, you actually the professional development, for example. So professional development in terms of the skills that we need, the education that we need in order to ensure that all the stakeholders are well equipped to support. I'm going to jump to Tracy because that's something that I think is very much to do with what you do, Tracy, in terms of mindset and professional development. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, this is so important for me, and especially when you're looking at if we need to get it right with our teachers, and then for the teachers to be right, they can then be able to model those behaviours and with our children. And I personally would like to see more time being spent on character building, balancing the technology with those life skills and enabling students to build the integrity, empathy and resilience, which are essential for their personal and professional successes, but it needs to start with our educators as well. And those life skills like critical thinking, teamwork, ethical judgments are increasingly important in preparing our young adults and also the educators for the future. And giving that sense of belonging and responsibility, I believe, that can lay that strong foundation for their future successes. And yeah, especially the personal development. I mean, I could talk about that side of it all day long.
Don't worry, we'll get there.
Yeah.
I mean, you've touched on a number of things. So in terms of, Michael, you said really it's making what we do right now even better and utilising the tools that we have at our disposal. Partly there's a capacity building scenario there that we've touched on, and having our educators able to do that, to integrate successfully and to some extent allow pedagogy to drive technology. I wonder if we're in a situation now where we're having conversations about technology driving what we're doing in the classroom, because it seems to have kind of flipped over. Do you think that's happened? Are we looking now more at the technology, or are we still trying to get the pedagogy right using technology? I'm not sure where we are in some of our schools.
I think you're absolutely right, Tracy. I think if you did a straw poll of 100 schools, you might get 30 schools doing it one way and 70 schools doing it the other way, in terms of this is what we're going to use as a technology to drive education, and the other schools saying, well, this is education and this is how we're going to supplement it with technology. And And I think that can be, you know, difficult for the students and the parents and the teachers who potentially move schools. Priya just brought up the idea of the mobile phone ban in schools, which I personally don't support.
Neither do I. Yeah. So why don't you support it, Michael? Let's hear about why you don't support it.
Well, yeah. So I read the Department of Education report from last year about the banning of mobile phones and technology, and they talked about how some schools showed exemplary practice. In other schools, it was a daily battle. So rather than educate those schools and use technology to enhance learning, it was seen as the easier opinion to ban technology. And if we're looking at it from a well-being perspective and a mindfulness perspective, and we are very aware of obviously the social media being an issue and the mobile phone being an issue in school, then who is going to teach those critical thinking? Who's going to teach that level of empathy? If we're just ignoring it as a problem, it's only going to get worse. So that's why I don't agree with the ban of mobile phones. It's an incredible tool that can be used to supplement education. That's why I don't agree with the ban. It should be used as a tool for education. Not, in my opinion. It's an incredible tool. It's an incredible tool. But again, it's that, is a tool driving education, or is education driving?
I mean, I find students can be incredibly creative when sneaking their mobile phones into schools with a ban. Best one so far has been in a cheese sandwich. One of the schools that I worked in, I just thought that was great. The places that students were hiding their mobiles, and I can see why there is this division of those who are against it, because we've seen, you know, even this week I had someone send a photo of me, a teacher to me who was, you know, being videoed by a student. They were like up in arms. It's horrific, you know, it's against everything. And yeah, I understand students can misuse it, but I think we've touched on the fact there's a curriculum aspect and an education aspect. Priya, can you tell us a little bit more about your perspective on this?
Picking up from what Michael was saying as well about, you know, having a ban, if you think of other areas that we try and support our students, we know that it's a total ban is never going to be helpful because they don't learn how to control themselves. So I'm kind of caught between, I mean, I'm, you know, as I said, I'm not an educator trying to kind of, you know, teach to however many children and all the distractions. I mean, I do know that, you know, on all of the laptops, there are ways of getting round even the filters within the school. So, you know, a total ban, when it came out, I did think, I don't know how they're going to have a total ban on technology. So kind of picking up from what Michael's saying, I think, you know, if we look at the technology, you're talking about it in the curriculum, but there are now lots and lots of apps that schools are using in terms of mental well-being. You know, a lot of companies out there now who are, you know, the schools have bought programs off and they get data, or students are able to kind of say, I need a check-in. Because, you know, if we think of some of those vulnerable students in school, they aren't always able to just say, look, I need to go and see the counsellor or the head of pastoral care, whoever it is. You know, one of the things when I'm delivering safeguarding training is saying to schools, you know, where do you put up your posters of who are those key members of staff? You know, they can't just be on a corridor, because, you know, if I'm a child who needs to see someone, I'm not stopping in a busy corridor for everyone to go, oh, look at her, she needs to go see the counsellor, you know, she must be mad. So it's about, you know, thinking about all the different ways that we're getting out to our students to engage them. You know, there's some great programs out there. There's some, you know, some great platforms now where students can also, you know, get self-help modules. So again, you know, that I'm torn between, I can understand why they're banning phones or technology, but also we need to teach children how to be in control of their use of it. You know.
So just on that, do you think we've made leaps, or have we made small steps in terms of well-being and social emotional learning, particularly if we look at the relationship with social media and self-esteem, because we know that has a major impact on negative self-view or self-perspective. Do you think we're doing enough to educate students about media manipulation and about how to be more resilient in terms of social media and that constant pressure that students are under, using technology, for example?
I think at the moment it's like the horse has bolted and we're trying to catch up. In order for us to, I've always said the same thing, that any mental wellbeing program for the school needs to start right down in EYFS.
Yeah,
I equate safeguarding and mental wellbeing exactly the same. We need to be. I used to say when I worked as a social worker, it's all very well talking to our teenage girls about how not to get pregnant. I was like, but that's the wrong way of doing it. We should be teaching much younger about toxic relationships, healthy relationships, so that these vulnerable children in the care system are not looking for validation and love in the wrong places. And using that kind of idea, it's the same thing with mental well-being. We should be starting it right down with the little ones, and helping them it sounds really, but that whole love yourself before you can love anyone else. But it's that absolutely understand they are.
100%.
Before
Absolutely.
adversity kicks in and before we start worrying about what we look like, because increasingly children of a younger age are worried about what they look like, and that's heartbreaking, actually. And once they're there, you've kind of lost that opportunity. So starting it as young as possible.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Tracy, have you got anything to add on this? Do you do much advising around this particular area regarding technology?
I think for me it's more about, we work with staff members and leaders, things, and I think for us with the technology is using it in the right way and educating people in the right way with it, because as we know there's some good stuff out there and there's equally some things out there that we don't want our young adults to see. But again, it's trusting our young adults. And I think what Priya was saying is just enabling that space at a young age to understand, because you don't know what you don't know. And being able to trust and build those skill set, especially around technology, and enabling our young adults to understand that actually it's okay to be off the screen.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's kind of our own worst enemy.
Yes, because it becomes quite a habit, and it's my phone is down here now, and it's like your eyes are going down checking every time you see the screen ping up.
Yeah.
And we've built this society of the habits around needing it in our hands and needing it close by, and I believe that it's just having that balance and re-educating ourselves to come off, to breathe, and to say that we're not going to miss anything if we are just 10 minutes off the screen.
Thank you. Just moving to another question, Tracy, that you're leading on here is, in terms of the future of the evolving pedagogy and skills in terms of tomorrow's workforce. How can we should we be moving from a content-heavy curriculum to a skills focus? So we talked about resilience, we've talked about critical skills, we've talked about the skills of practical use of technology. If you look at the workforce, I think it was the World Education Forum put out a report where there are many roles now that have become obsolete. We don't seem to have kind of shifted in our kind of educational design to meet the needs of the students for the future. What are your thoughts on that in terms of not only our students and the curriculum, but also on our teachers and their ability to move from being the transmitter of all knowledge to that facilitator so students can develop those skills?
Yeah, I do believe strongly that the roles of teachers in the future of education are expected to evolve significantly due to technological advancements and the changing of students' needs. And I know that Michael would probably elaborate a lot better than me along with the technological advancements, but I believe that teachers would begin to blend various skills from going from knowledge deliverers to also becoming facilitators of learning, and teachers will transition from not only being the primary source of information to also becoming facilitators who guide students in exploring and constructing their own knowledge, so the use of these tech platforms. But also I think teachers will play that main role, as Priya said, in supporting students' emotional well-being and social skills, and I believe it's going to change more to the facilitator's role, but also as a mentoring and coaching. But equally important is for teachers to understand their own internal systems, being able to build their own resilience, their own toolkit and knowledge and wisdom towards their own personal development. And that I do believe that resilience and coaching programs that support staff to elevate their own emotional literacy and skills will be an important part of CBD. But what's important is to ensure a two-pronged approach to coaching, which means understanding how to coach externally, but also coaching oneself and understand the psychology of one's mind to utilize the inner coaching techniques. And as you mentioned earlier, we have delivered this methodology to over 4,000 individuals, and we have seen a shift in mindset and a deeper understanding of their personal responsibility towards their own professional development. And in many cases, we've seen a change in culture as a result of it. And in my opinion, I believe that teachers not only engaging in that continuous learning to stay updated on educational trends, technologies, pedagogical strategies, but to also further enhance their own toolkit to enable them to lead oneself. And what we mean by leading oneself is the importance of the introspective reflection in aiding them to support themselves in navigating the complexities of the ever-changing landscapes. And we've just completed a 9-month pilot study here in Wales, where we have 3 schools participating in our online personal growth curriculum for teachers. And that's based in current research, and we've called it Leading Oneself. It's all around the mind management. And we had 106 educators participating, which included all tiers: head teachers, senior leaders, teachers, administrators, lunchtime supervisors, where they had access to over 300 minutes of our content. And this included topics like emotional intelligence, self-regulation, resilience, coaching. And they held rich weekly dialogue sessions to enhance them, to just embed these strategies. And the change experienced, it helped them to become more positive. We've just finished the study now. We've collecting all the reports. And at the moment, we're at 82% of participants stated a change in their well-being. And going back to, you don't know what you don't know. So enabling staff to understand how the mechanics of their minds work. How can I better manage myself? And out of that 82% that stated a change in their well-being, 100% stated that holding rich dialogues within groups together cemented their key learnings, because they'd never come together before. They've never had a program about them before.
So, I mean, from my perspective, I would say probably what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So students in a similar position where they are enabled to have more power over their own learning and their own agency. Will we ever get to a point, Michael, where it's not even just facilitators, where students co-construct and have co-agency in the classroom in the future of education?
So I think that's that kind of co-design and that the curriculum construction and that learning discussion is really important. And going back to the question, and to elaborate on what Tracy said there, the curriculum that I currently deal with is the entertainment arts, so VFX, 3D animation, game design, film and TV production. And what is more important in this industry than the qualification is the skill set, the communication skills. That is something that is embedded into our curriculum, because it's something that you need to be able to operate in this very agile space. So I think that's really important to kind of discuss it. That's because coming from traditional education into this kind of tertiary education where we're focusing on a certain skill set, it's really interesting to see how we're not bound. And the reason, lots of the research I've done recently, and there's lots of, it's quite upsetting actually, what I've read, or quite demoralizing, because and maybe I'm wrong here, please correct me, all of you, but because at the end of the day, the student have to do exams. So there is a very rigid set, there's a very rigid end goal. So that idea of co-creation of the learning, co-creation of the curriculum, and having that discussion. And again, this goes back to mental health as well, Priya, for the teachers, for the educators, where they have a target to hit and they have 9 months to hit it. And so I love everything that Tracy said, and I love everything that Priya said in terms of having this conversation and getting together and that. But at the end of the day, that pressure, that pressure from management for those exams, come February time, like the systems might buckle, and you resort back to didactic education and exam prep, and then the stress levels, and then it's a cyclical approach, because all of the excellent work that so many people are doing in terms of this research, but we're always constrained by the fact that, I mean, the examination process hasn't changed. Everything about education has changed, and we're still assessing students in the exact same manner we have.
Same way. Assessment model. You mean?
It makes no sense. Like we're having all this energy and effort and money and investment and time talking about the process leading up to the exam, but we haven't changed that system. We still, for some reason, prefer the idea of measuring students and schools against each other to see who's best.
May I share something there to add to that as well?
Please.
It's we designed a 16 to 24-year-old PAL, it's called PAL, Preparation for Adult Life, a skills-based online program. And when we did the test and trial phase within schools, there was one school, we had about 48 students at the tables, no teacher in sight at that time. And we started to talk about the program, the skills they were going to learn, etc., and they were really engaged, looking forward to starting. We then enabled the teachers to go to the tables to talk about how we're going to embed it within their timetable. And within 30 minutes of that happening, have a guess what problem came prominent at that table? Time. Exactly what Michael just said there now. And the staff, in all fairness to the staff, there's no judgment here at all. They could see how this program was needed to help and support the mental well-being of the students, but pragmatically they didn't have the time to put it in because of the exams. And the students didn't even talk about time, but the teachers could see the issue and problems that they'd have because they're so inundated with getting them exam ready, which was such a shame, shame.
So, I mean, would you agree, though, that if we moved away, because content's there now, any student can go online and they can get content for pretty much anything. And we've talked about the fact that they can use self-help modules, there's courses, there's credentialing. We don't actually, I mean, in many places, students that go through that educational journey, not to denigrate that by any sense of the word, but sometimes getting a degree, they go into, maybe an area that Michael is leading on, and they don't have the skill set, so they can't do it. Their degree then becomes, something that they then can't use because, many employers now identify those skills that students need in order to be successful in not only in our current society, but in we're talking about the future, and we know that there are a whole range of jobs that have now become obsolete because we're still not providing students with the skill set. If we do that, because the content is there, surely we can look at what our curricula and we can say, you know what, there are things here that maybe are also so archaic that we don't need them anymore, and we need to put in more entrepreneurial thinking, more well-being, more looking at, loving ourselves and looking towards the future where if you look at many of the reports, not everyone will be employed in the future. It's some of the studies say that 40% of our children who are in KG at the moment will have their own businesses. but we're not actually educating them to be able to run those businesses. What do you think, Michael, about that? What's your answer about the skills versus content curriculum question?
Well,
do you think we're doing it? Are we any way nearer actually enabling our students to navigate what is a challenging and uncertain future?
It's a great, I mean, I can't speak for every school. I can't speak for every
Sure.
curriculum. But in my experience, from the schools I've worked at and what I'm doing now, I wouldn't say so. And that's only in my very narrow experience from what I've seen. And that's like working with exam boards as well, because again, it's that kind of measurable, like it's very difficult to measure some of the more critical life skills than it is to measure how good you are at maths or science or English. So there's no incentive to do that, because you can't really measure it. So you can't say that one school is better at doing it than another. I know that's quite simple, but that's that kind of like, it's going to be driven by the schools taking it up, rather than what the workforce demands. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't think we're more prepared.
Do you think we're measuring the wrong things, Priya?
100%. 100%. I 100%. I'm not saying that you should measure, and I'm not saying I have the answer, but measuring the current method that we have, the current metrics that we make, I don't think prepare students for the future. They are very good with the KHK report, Ofsted reports, and they're very good at highlighting some high-level data to what school is better than the other and which school is better. But actually, for the life skills and the critical skills, social skills, and the empathy, I don't think that I don't think there is as much more energy, effort. There is some incredible practice, but it's still not enough compared to the other very easy measurable stuff that currently is the archaic practice, in my opinion.
So in the UAE, we actually have well-being as part of our inspection process, and there are elements of culture of the school, how well we do that. So I'm going to go back to Priya now and say, do you think we've made small steps or leaps, or do you feel like we're back to where we were pre-COVID, Priya?
I think it is very dependent on the schools and the school on its own. Is it part of a larger set of schools? You know, what are the KPIs for that particular school or school?
So now they have them. Now you have a judgment where, you know, the school will be judged on how well they support students, how good their counselling is, or their pastoral care. So it's pushed schools into a place where they need to really focus on that and look at it now, and because they're going to have a judgment made on them.
So I'm smiling. The cynical Priya says a lot of schools do the tick box exercise. Yeah. So anyone can write a mental wellbeing policy. Anyone can write a wellbeing for staff policy. And, you know, so many people have heard me say this, wellbeing is more than tea and cake. It really is. And if we flip this out of the classroom, I can't remember who was saying, I think it was Tracy, you were saying about teachers and that introspective reflection and their own emotional, their own SEL. It's the same thing if we take this away from the students for just a minute and we look at our educators. Again, lots of data, lots of research. If teachers are working in a toxic work environment and they're coming into work stressed, they are not going to deliver effective lessons. Okay, so whether they're facilitating, delivering, whatever it is, if they're not in a good place, and our students know if a teacher isn't in a good place. Yeah. And our students, when I was working directly with students would say to me, Miss came in today and she said, she wasn't feeling 100% and would you mind as the class if we kept the noise down? And it's fine, because actually she wasn't feeling very well and we got it. And I just thought, okay, where do we stand with that? With the adult in the class actually going, I've got a headache today. I'm not saying that, we're not going to have a really excellent, outstanding lesson. I'm just saying that maybe we could work together to keep the noise down. And, that comes back to that role playing about saying sometimes we're not okay. And sometimes we just have to ask for a bit of help. But coming back to what you were saying about the inspection, I think we need to look deeper at what's happening, because far too many schools, and I'm a school accreditor as well. So I can go into school and they can give me all the bits of paperwork that I need. But when you actually talk to the staff, they're saying something entirely different. Cake and coffee, it's not the real thing.
Yeah.
Just on that, just before we move to another question, what's your advice then to schools to move away from, when they talk about teacher appreciation, and they want to improve the culture of the school so teachers do feel valued? Where do you start with that, as from your perspective as an advisor, Priya?
I think it's looking at things like your health insurance in a school. Have staff, does your health insurance facilitate staff to go and have counselling outside of school if they need it? Because
many don't, do they?
Many don't, yeah. What is your, but you will have staff who have issues that arise, okay? It's not the schools. I think it was Mark Lepard did a really great article saying, schools have a professional responsibility around well-being, but not that they can't take responsibility for personal well-being. But when you've got a member of staff who's maybe having a tough time outside of school, how are we supporting that member of staff? If they suddenly need to go for an appointment, are we making them do, 5 forms to get it approved before they can even walk out of school? A lot of teachers, one of the big things that teachers say to me is, I can't afford to be sick. If I'm sick, I have to make a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning, then I have to set cover work. I may as well just go in. And, I think, oh, okay, so you're going in, you're not well, you're then sharing your jails generously. But, it's these kind of conversations that need to be happening in schools. Staff, that's what's going to help staff feel valued. It's not, we know it's not the pay at the end of the day. How many meetings have we got a week? How many times have we stay late after school or before school or working their lunch hours, and that expectation that, no, if we have a meeting, you have to do it in your lunch hour. Well, the lunch hours are time for them to maybe take a breather. So, it's or not.
Yeah.
Or not. So, how many people are sitting at their desk? So it's all of those kind of conversations. That's not going to be a one size fits all, because it depends on the school and, the demands of that school. But yeah, it's not tea and cake, that's for sure.
So, from my perspective, we talked about roles and responsibilities. We talked about the sort of equalising of power in the classroom. And as a colleague of mine would always say to me, it's all about communication and relationships. And I think that goes for everyone, students, teachers, leadership. It is all about relationships and communication. It's all about, even walking into a classroom and asking the students, how are they? How are you doing today? And the same
Eye contact.
And actually the students feeling like you're a human, they're a human, they care. So we move away from those quite rigid roles of teacher, student, and the power relationships between them. And I think that affects the kind of the pedagogy as well. So I just want to go back to Michael on that. So how can Michael, you work in terms of gamification, virtual, augmented reality, immersive experiences, and we know that there's a capacity issue in many of our schools. We're still working on what you talked about, the very prescriptive nature of our curricula, and we're still, doing maths on a Thursday afternoon. But actually that video project that we allowed students to go and do in maybe an extracurricular time was the thing that they're really excited about. How can they transform the learning experiences for students from your perspective?
Well, it's really interesting that you kind of started with that idea of that kind of very rigid student mentality, like 1 to 25 students. If you look back at historical pictures of classrooms, Victorian classrooms, So there's been some technology and maybe there's a laptop there, but that idea is still identical.
Exactly.
And then when you look at like science fiction and you look at the future and these fantastic science fiction writers that write, and there's a classroom, it's still one teacher, and even the most vivid science fiction writers can't move away from that one teacher, 25 students sat in a room. It's it's quite rigid. So there is lots of ways that technology can definitely enhance that, and definitely kind of help to break that down. Obviously, AI and XR are two of the most kind of hot topics right now, in helping this shape the classroom.
Because that helps everything, right? So you can use it for problem solving, you can use it for certain relationships, for supporting students emotionally in lots of different ways, because you can create scenarios that students can work safely within, correct?
Yeah, so if we just look at kind of AI as just very briefly, because there's so many brilliant people who've done some stuff on this, but the way I use AI or in the classroom and with the students is to use it as a personal teaching assistant, because you can get questions, and every student therefore using chat, for example, or other AIs, has a personal assistant. It's not doing the work for them. It's a very good critical friend, a critical friend that is looking at their work and making them. The student is still doing all of the work. They're just seeking that critical advice, making iterative improvements and improving it. It also works with the teacher, because the administrative tasks that they have to do, because everyone is so, crazy busy with admin tasks, but it can help reduce that, which means the teachers can therefore focus on the quality of their lessons. So it's all about enhancing, like I said, just using technology to make the lessons better, because AI can supplement a lot of the administrative tasks that have to be done, and then the teacher can concentrate on the content and the delivery of the lesson. The students have artificial intelligence TAs, for example, where the teacher doesn't have to spend as much time with the individual students, because they're all contribute. It's not doing the work for them, and it's about teaching them to use the tool, not just take the information. And with XR, with XR, like you said, it's about creating that space, taking the students outside of the classroom, showing them locations, showing them the different environments, taking them out and putting them in those places for history lessons, for geography lessons, for English lessons. You can take them and they can experience it. It's experiential learning, and with AI enhanced the XR in the future, they could have conversations with Romeo and Juliet. They could have conversations with the people from a play. So they're not just reading it; they're experiencing that learning. It's just a different way of getting that knowledge. But of course, there are so many barriers to this, but it's that idea of what could the future be, and it's not a replacement for the traditional education. It's a supplement. It's just, this is how we're going to enhance what we currently do, and it won't be every lesson. It'll just be when it's needed, when it's required, to bring that level of education up and to enhance that immersive pedagogy.
Really interesting and so true. So it enables our students to go places that they wouldn't normally go. Because I watched, I just saw something on LinkedIn the other day, and it was a school where all the kids were using the VR glasses and all the rest of it. And I recall when they first came in, the teachers were pretty clueless about where to go with this stuff. And it's like, okay, I can go to the desert. So the geography teacher was like, I can teach around this stuff. But they didn't really understand how to use it for their benefit. One of the questions here is, surely communication, collaboration, curiosity, and critical thinking are the most important skills that young people need. I would also argue that enabling them to lead projects such as you've described, or have experience like that, would also enhance the development of those skills. What do you think, Tracy? I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think when we talk about those critical enhancement skills for the students, we've got to go back to the teachers again, because we've come across many of the times that they struggle in holding communication and holding that strong collaboration together and being able to give and receive effective feedback. What does that look like? How does that look like amongst the students, gaining that confidence? And, you know, like Michael was saying now, is using AI as a critical friend and a tool, but equally bringing in these critical thinking skills. How do we evolve that together as teams? How can we raise the bar on confidence? I think, Priya, you mentioned earlier on that what we want to do with our young adults is to build that confidence with them from a very young age, so that they can healthily have those debates, healthily engage in those critical thinking skills together as a team to build a stronger cohesive network.
Priya, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think the AI, I mean, we talked about it in terms of the enhancement. I think one of the worries I have, and it's because I'm putting my safeguarding hat on at the moment, is
and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, well, what me with the safeguarding around AI, we worry all the time about cyberspace and online safety for our children, etc. And one of the things that I think AI is great in terms of, and I loved what Michael was saying about, a student can write a piece of work and the AI can then act like, a coach or TA or looking over it. But my worry is we know that there's the darker side to AI. And we're not really having those conversations around the safeguarding aspects of AI and how it can, teaching children to be safe using it and how it can be used in a way, a lot of schools in the UAE, that a lot of schools go on about the cyberbullying and that, they're really struggling with the relationships that children have outside of school. And that's something we've just been talking about, that relationship building. And AI here is where I have a real worry in terms of what we've seen, what can already be done with AI, with celebrities' heads being put on this, that, and the other. And thus far, I've not seen anything coming out in regards to how are we going to be equipping our young people to stay on the safe side of AI as opposed to the not safe side. If I go down the rabbit hole of online grooming, how AI might end up being used for that, I could go on and on and on. So I think, whilst we're talking about all the positives, I think there is a huge piece of work also to be done with stakeholders. And by that, I mean the parents need to be involved in these conversations, as well as the educators, as well as the young people. And absolutely. I think sometimes, we don't give young people enough credit. Sometimes I think they are a bit more ahead of where we are as the adults. So I think, that we need to bring them in conversation and start those conversations off with them. But having parents on board and the teachers, we've got to do it all together as a community.
So then just on that, so for me, what does that mean then for curriculum and assessment? So what does that mean for us in terms of, because if we're not doing that, if we are talking about future of education, we're looking at evolving pedagogy, we're talking about great use of AI, we can't carry on assessing the students in the same way, because they can use AI, they can just look it up, learn it, come and regurgitate it. So there needs to be significant changes, I would assert, in the way that the curriculum stands right now and the assessment of the curriculum. And I'm not just talking about academics, I'm also talking about that well-being curriculum. Maybe that's entrepreneurial knowledge, maybe that's well-being and looking at the future when people may have more time on their hands. They're not going to be involved in work for the whole of their adult lives. So what are they doing? How are we supporting our communities, our children, for their future roles in society? And so therefore, what is it saying about the curriculum and assessment? And I'm touching on also some of the questions that are being asked here about, are there opportunities for partnerships beyond the school walls? can coaches come in? Can we utilize the experience that you guys have in order to enhance what we're doing in the schools? What do you think, Michael?
Absolutely. Like, there are we, and again, it goes back to what you've said earlier on, and everyone's touched on a few times. Does the current curriculum prepare the youth for the jobs of tomorrow? And it's a question that's been asked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and I think now probably more than ever, it doesn't. The curriculum doesn't prepare them for the jobs of tomorrow because of, like you said, the changes and the overt changes to empathy. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have that kind of well-being focus, and that's a really big, important piece now.
Yeah.
And is that being reflected? I don't think so. In the assessment, I don't think so.
So is in terms of that then. So if we go back to curriculum, a huge amount of investment has happened in digital resources in many schools. A lot of schools have got money to invest. They know that that's the future. Software platforms that adapt learning, and we get different personalized pathways.
Yep.
Do you feel like we've seen bang for buck in our schools? And is it because we don't have the capacity, the training? And I go to kind of Michael and then Tracy on that one. Where do we need to go in order to really ensure that we get the most impact for our students?
Well, again, it goes back to what Priya said as well. And there's so much research around this. The idea of, okay, schools have invested X amount of money, and because they've invested X amount of money, there is the expectation that the staff will integrate this into their practice now, which creates extra levels of stress. There isn't the time given to implement these new features that are being introduced. And if you're a teacher of a certain age, you've potentially seen many historical failed initiatives come and go, where it's like, oh, now we're doing this, and now we're doing this, and now we're doing this. And it's like, well, to answer your question, are we getting bang for the buck? I don't. Again, I can't speak for every school, but
sure.
The research that I have done around this kind of area is that there is an incredible amount of extra techno stress added when new initiatives are brought in, and the expectation is you have to do this, and you're given a 2-hour PD on it, and then tomorrow is part of your pedagogy. So well, hold on a second, like this doesn't, like how on earth can I change what I do? I don't know enough about this, and so it's abandoned. It's not implemented. So I have seen, and the research says that, no, I wouldn't say people are getting bang for their buck. I've seen LMSs be left bare. I've seen like bad uses of technology. I've seen more failed initiatives than positive initiatives, and that's just in my very narrow experience. From the schools I've worked at, both here and in the UK.
Yeah, we. I'm going to add to that with Michael as well. That when we created the platform that we created, one of my biggest concerns was, how do you measure emotional intelligence? How do you measure soft skills? And for me, we took it right back to basics, where at the end of we talk about chapters within our program, and there's 6 sections in every chapter, and every chapter are building blocks. And there's a pre and post assessment, and it's down to the individual. There is no right, there is no wrong. It's how that individual looks and views at that piece of knowledge that they're learning. They reflect on it, and then they create an action plan so that they can embed that learning in their day-to-day lives. But what we found was, at the end of every chapter, we created an e-portfolio with only 4 questions. 4 simple questions in this e-portfolio. And Tracy was just saying now that at the end of every chapter, we trialed out, first of all, an e-portfolio with 4 specific questions in it. The student then answers those 4 questions down to what are their key learnings, how can they implement it in the real world, and it's back to basics. What they do with that information then, it gets emailed back to them, and then they evidence that as their e-portfolio for their leadership certification to go into the workplace. What we wanted to do is to design a form of assessment where we are coming back to communication. So if there's a manager in the workplace and the young adult can go into the workplace, say, look, I've been working on my independent soft skills, my emotional intelligence, this is what I've learned. The e-portfolio can get given to the manager as that evidence. And the manager can have those independent conversations to coach them, upskill them further. But it's coming back to communication, human connection. And this is what we're assessing, right on the shop floor, watching, observing, where then we created a brochure for the manager that they can then ask the questions. Okay, within your portfolio, you've demonstrated, you've explained that you've learned how to give and receive feedback. Last week in our meeting, for example, we noticed that you were very quiet in the meeting and gave sort of like substantial feedback back. What can we do to further enhance this for you? How rich are those dialogues? Because now it's not making anybody wrong, it's not making anybody right, where the only assessment criteria is on oneself. Because for me, I could assess myself on my key skills of where I am. The person next door to me might say their effective communication skills are brilliant. Who am I to say that they're a 1 out of a 10 or a 10 out of a 10 when only you know that? And if we can measure against our learnings, our understanding of what we've just learned, we can then build upon that for the individual, not as an overrun and putting people in a box. And that was very, very important to us. And all through my career, I felt, 20 odd years in education, the amount of coaching and training that we've delivered over the years, that for me, that has to be independently for the person. And I'm very, very passionate about that. You're assessing where that person is, where their needs are at that time. And what we can do within the workplace then is build upon those skills by communicating together.
So, as you know, those are the skills that employers want their employees to have. Wouldn't that be great if that was transferred into the school and it doesn't become a kind of, a quick 10 minutes or one question to the students, that actually it's part of the curriculum, Priya? What would you say?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, it comes down to, sounds basic, but it is those relationships. And one of the ways that maybe we can look at assessment, for want of a better word, is the communication that a student has, the relationships that they are building. And if things are not going well for them, what are they doing to seek the help? We're not saying that every student's going to get through school and there's going to be no problems, but when they've got a problem, have they got those relationships? Have they built those relationships in to be able to go and seek the help? It's never going to be easy, is it, to assess emotional intelligence, but there are ways we can do it in terms of, it becomes very personal, doesn't it? Very individual and unique to the child.
So, in the OECD tried it with global competence, and we said the same thing there, that was an area that we felt, how are you going to measure it? It's not going to work, but they did. And it is an area that is really important, and how we learn and build our own attitudes about the world is in many of the questions there. So I think we've pretty much come to the stage where we were all agreed that we need to have a complete revision of our current educational system, everyone. And we need to ensure that we are really thinking about well-being, really thinking about skills development, relationships, changing those traditional roles and responsibilities of teacher and student, and that's going to have a much more positive effect on the adults that are coming out of our education system. And we need to look at all of the obsolete assessments and examinations that we know are not helping our children. So we need to get a sledgehammer and start it all again. And hopefully the three of you will be part of that process. I think we've got a minute left, and We didn't get to our question around learning spaces and classrooms of the future and being in the virtual world. I think classrooms of the future is probably a paradox in terms, really, when we talk about immersive learning experiences. But certainly, this is just a taster for the bigger discussion at the GESS conference. Can I thank each of you for your contributions, and look forward to seeing everyone at that conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was a really insightful discussion today, so thank you for joining us. And if any of our attendees have any additional questions, or you want to connect with any of our speakers, you can reach out to us. Just email us at marketing@guesseducation.com. We always love to hear from you. Before we wrap up, I would like to remind you all that Guest By is just around the corner. I'll just add this up now. So it's taking place on the 12th to the 14th of November at the Dubai World Trade Center, and it will be in the Shakeside Halls 1, 2, and 3. So you should see the pop-up on your screen now with the registration link. You can also sign up via our website, though, at guestdubai.com. So we hope that we're going to see a lot of you guys there. And then lastly, there'll be a recording of the webinar available on the GESS Education website and our YouTube channel, and we'll send it out via email to all of our attendees as well. So please don't forget to complete the survey that appears at the end of the session as well, so you can add your feedback and suggestions for any future webinar topics. So thanks again to all of our panelists and our audience for being here today. Be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter so you can stay up to date on any upcoming webinars and events. But until then, have a lovely day and rest of your week, and goodbye for now, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.